you were with me last week, I started a little series on passing the baton. And the whole series is going to be about the importance of us um, passing our faith on to future generations. And it doesn't have to just be our children and grandchildren, it can be any of our relatives, our nieces, our nephews, our neighbors, people within our church, just anyone that is within your realm of influence. So I really want you to think about all of the different people you come in contact with every day who you may not even see as being an opportunity of sharing your faith and leaving your legacy of faith too. And so part of this, I just keep running across the importance of giving our testimony. And I think when I was younger and I heard someone say, we're going to have a night of testimony at church, and the whole night would be about people getting up and giving their testimony. And it always was about the story of how they got saved or how they came to know Christ. But our testimony can be much more than that. It can be a way of helping others in times of need by sharing our story of the things that we've gone through and how God has brought us through that trial or that hardship, or maybe it was something that was really, really good. And we are able to share our story. And so it's my story for His glory. And so that's the point of this lesson tonight. And so I looked up the word, what is a testimony? And there are many definitions that don't necessarily apply to this. For example, your testimony in a court case, in a legal battle, you might have to give a testimony. But for our purposes, a testimony is an open acknowledgement, a public profession of a religious experience. But what I really liked is a written or spoken record of what God has done. And so when we tell someone or we write down what God has done, we share that with someone else, it's very powerful. And we're going to see why. And so I ran across a sermon by John Lindell, and it was about the importance of giving a testimony, giving our testimony. And he said, when you and I recite what God has done, it multiplies the miracle of God's power. So every time we tell something that He's done in our life that was miraculous, we are multiplying that by sharing it and telling others. And also giving our testimony elevates the faith of those hearing us. And that's very true. When we hear someone else give their story of something amazing God has done, it encourages us that if He did it for them, He'll do it for me. And that's very powerful in helping us encourage each other in our walk. I ran across this and I thought it was just wonderful. I'd never heard of the word aduth. Aduth is how it was pronounced. But this Hebrew word, aduth, means do it again with the same power and authority. And that's what the word testimony means in Hebrew. So when we say the word testimony in Hebrew, it means do it again with the same power and authority. So every time we speak out or read a testimony, we're saying, Lord, do it again with that same power and authority. And the reason for giving our testimony is strictly to give God the glory. It's not about us, it's all about Him. So when we tell these stories about what God has done, the focus needs to be on Him. And I think too often I'm guilty of telling a story of something amazing that happened, but the focus becomes on me and the story instead of the focus really being on Him and what He did, and how it encouraged my faith or how I grew through that experience. And so I think it's just a mind shift that we all need to be aware of, that when we're telling stories that are giving God glory, let's really work on making Him the subject and not ourselves. And the Bible is full of stories. And when we are reading storybooks to children, that's just what they are. They're stories that they get engrossed in by the characters. There's a setting, there's a problem, a resolution oftentimes. And that's what the Bible is full of. And these are testimonies of what God has done, can do, and will do. And it's all for God's glory, not ours. So the point of the Bible is not, for us. It's all about Him. And we are able to use those stories to grow and then in turn encourage others. And so this scripture in Psalm 119, verse 111 is very important. The author of this particular psalm is unknown. So we don't know who was saying this, but they said, "Thy testimonies have I taken as an heritage forever, for they are the rejoicing of my heart." And you think, okay, what does that mean? So I use the SOAP method, which we've talked about in a previous lesson. I read the scripture slowly. I observed all of these different words that I wasn't sure of the meaning in the context by looking at different translations. And so thy testimonies in some translations meant laws, your decrees, your commands, your statutes. So it's talking about all of these things that are written in the Bible. Your testimonies have I taken as an heritage. Okay, what does it mean by heritage? It means a gift to me, an eternal possession. And when our parents leave us something as an inheritance, it's a possession, but it's not going to have eternal value like these testimonies, these laws, these decrees, these commands, and these statutes. An eternal possession. Think of that. For they are the rejoicing of my heart. The rejoicing in some scripture, in some references, meant the joy of my heart, my heart's delight, or makes me happy. And the Message translation I found particularly sweet. I inherited your book on living. It's mine forever. What a gift. And how happy it makes me. And so the Bible here is the testimony, and it's full of these stories. They are our heritage. They should make us happy. And so I hope in your journal this week, you will definitely record Psalm 119, verse 111. And then another scripture that talks about testimonies is Revelation 12, 10 through 11. And I did, and with the SOAP method, after you observe it, you think about A, how can I apply this? And then P, you pray about it and ask God to help you apply that to your life and give you more and more insight about it. So that's the SOAP method. And in Revelation 12, 10 through 11, verse 10 says, "And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now has come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night." And this is talking about during the time of tribulation. And then verse 11 says, "And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death." So the accuser is cast down. That's Satan. And how is he overcome? He's overcome by the blood of the Lamb, Christ dying on the cross for us, and by the word of their testimony, that, those stories that are telling of his great power, and they love not their lives unto death. So they were willing to, during the tribulation, there will be people who come to know Christ, and they will be there will be opportunities for them to become martyrs and lay down their lives for this cause. And so I just think it's amazing that the power our testimonies have, and we should see it as a tool that God can use. And our job is just to say our story, just to tell our story. That's a very small, easy part, and He does all the hard work. So, how do we craft our testimony or testimonies? We have stories. Our testimony is not just the story of how we got saved. It could be, and that could be what someone needs to hear, of how God convicted us and how we felt, and the whole story of how we came to know Him. But it could also be a story of what He's done in our life that someone may need to hear. So our stories should have a theme. A theme may be overcoming disease or sickness. It could be how you overcame a divorce, a death, what grief is all about, and how you've navigated that. It should be a good story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you should have key points that you want to keep in mind. What are the most important things that I want to tell? The main focus should be on what God has done. Just like I talked about earlier, your testimony is about Him. He's the main character. Don't go into too many details. For example, you don't have to draw a story out for 30 minutes, giving every little detail. If you're talking about a time in your life when you were sick, you may not tell all of the different stages and all of the hardships, but you could just talk about it as being a very difficult time, and then how God brought you through it, but stick to that main point. I watched several videos and read a lot about this, and it was advised that you keep boundaries. You don't have to go into so much detail, and you may not want to give a testimony or tell a story about something you're currently dealing with. You may not have gone through it, and it made me think of our lesson on scars. Sometimes we're wounded, and then those wounds heal and they become scars, and then those scars can become our testimony. But when you're in the process of healing, it may not be the right time to tell that story. And then finally, trust God to use your story to do what He wants to do. Let Him use your story. You just tell it and then pray about it. That it's just planting a seed. And so one thing that I want us to do is to write our testimonies down. We're going to practice it, think about it, and be willing to tell someone when the time comes. And so Isaiah 12:5 says, "Sing praises to the Lord, for He has done gloriously. Let this be made known in all the earth." We should be praising Him and thanking Him and telling others about what He has done. And each time we do that, that is a testimony. So think about it. What has He done for you lately? If I were to, get back on with each of you in person and give you an assignment to tell out loud, what is something He's done for you lately? What would you be able to say? And that can be what you craft into a very short story that could be your testimony. For me, it would be, my word of the year is strong. Not that I'm strong, but I'm looking to Him to be my strength. And it has been, a really rough few months, but He has been so faithful, and I feel His strength. And I can truly tell someone who's going through very dark times that every single time you start to feel down, you look to Him and He will sustain you. So that would be a short testimony that I could give to someone who is dealing with loss through death, caregiving, all the things that sometimes get really hard in life. So for my journaling ideas, I hope this doesn't scare you away, because I know it's pretty wild looking, But when I saw both of these pictures, there were aspects of them that I really, really liked. I loved the watercolor effect of the one on the left, and where it says my world, I'm going to have my story. I love the word vision. We should have a vision of how we're going to look for opportunities to tell our stories when we have when the opportunity arises. We should be ready and be thinking, he's going to put someone in my path today that I can share a story with, and then be ready to do it. And then on the right hand side, I love the little picture window of someone looking through. And so while the words of these two pictures aren't necessarily what I would record, I do like the way they're laid out. And so I'm going to be kind of copying some of that. And I would encourage you to also. I really like how the handwritten lettering looks here. See how some words are written more bold? The word so and the word now here are written more boldly to really make them stand out. I like that technique. And then I like over here on the left-hand side how you could just write out your verses, or maybe even a little testimony right there on your page. Up here on the top, I've hyperlinked, it says personal testimony worksheet. When you click on that, it's going to take you to a worksheet where you can write out a short 15-second testimony, kind of like what I just shared. It tells you a format, and it actually gives you words that you can say, and you just fill in a few blanks. And then it talks about a longer testimony. Let's say you're asked to give your testimony at a women's event, and you're going to be given 20 to 30 minutes. You would want to add more detail and go into much more depth. But I want you to look at this worksheet this week if you have an opportunity, and you may want to incorporate that into your journal pages. So I'll switch screens and show you what I started working on. So the first thing I did when I saw that little window, it made me think of the technique we've used before. Remember when we made our little books of It Is Written, and we made little books, and I showed you how to use an envelope. Here it is. We used the envelope to make the little book. Okay, that is the same thing I did here. I took one of these envelopes that has the little wide window, and I used watercolored pencils. I used a lot of watercolor pencils on this week, and they're just colored pencils that you can color with, and then when you add water, they smear and it makes a watercolor effect. So I colored around that. I slid my picture in and glued it up. It was actually cut on this end, the one I used, but what I would do here, I would color that, cut it off, slide my picture inside, and glue that down. Then I took a little punch, a little circle punch, and just punched a half circle so that you have a little indentation, so that I can put cards in and out and reach down in and get them if they slide too deep. This was just a picture I printed off the internet. It's not that, my ink is running low, it looks like, so I need to take care of that. I'm going to glue that down here, probably over here to the side, so that it leaves room here to write my verses. I used on my page, because I had the ink from this was bleeding through, and so I took this product called acrylic gesso, which I really like, and it's not very expensive, but it's a product that I think is worth investing in, especially when you're using a journal like this that's not got really thick pages. I took an old credit card or gift card, and then I just smeared that down like this all over my pages. And I've used this before and shown you, but it's kind of like white acrylic paint, but it's thicker and it has a smoother texture. So this is great to put on a page, like if you wanted to put it on a book page to so that you could then write on top of that book page. For example, here's a book page. You take some of this, you smear it on. And this may be way too messy for some of you, but I really like the look of it. Then when this dries, I could make things out of it and I would be able to write on it. And so that's a lot of fun. And then that's what I first put on these pages before I even got started, and I let that dry. Then I went around the edges with these colored markers, and I didn't go all the way around because I wanted to colored pencils. I wanted to show you how I did it. So I just color random. You know, I'm not really trying to do a great job. Let that bleed into a lighter color maybe. And then when I take a little bit of water and rub over that, it just turns into watercolor paint. And it blends. So I did the exact same thing with this circular picture, which is kind of taken from our inspiration picture. I just took a reddish orange colored pencil and did just loop-de-loop-de-loop circles. Did the same thing with green, and then went back with a little bit of purpley blue, and then drew the heart. Then I just took the water and went around it, and it started to smear out and bleed out, and I could, you know, bleed it more if I wanted to go over it even more. And I just did that all the way around my edges. Did the same thing with the yellow and the green up here. And then I wrote out the verse that I want you to put in your journal this week, Psalm 119, 111. This was just a scrap piece of paper. And I made some of my words stand out that I really wanted to remember. You know, the Bible is full of testimonies. That's a heritage for us. It's our gift. It should make us very, very happy and joyful. And so I went around that with these colored pencils and watercolored those a little bit. I laid it down here, did the exact same thing around the edges with this pencil, just sloppy, very messy, and then did the exact same thing. Now I want to take a black pen and just don't try to be overly neat. If you do this, I want you to, you know, step outside of the comfort zone a little bit. And then I'm going to glue that down. That black just gives it a little bit of framing. And so then I used stickers, My Story for His Glory. And this was an epic fail right here. I used a piece of washi tape and I tried to put the word testimony on it with these little sticker letters that you have to scratch off. They're scratch off letters. You lay them down, scratch them, pick it up, and you can't even see it. So then I tried to take it off and it just tore my page. So what I plan to do here is put a wider piece of washi tape, a wider piece, and then put sticker letters on there that will actually show up, because this didn't show up. You couldn't read it. So that was a problem. But like my friend Paula says, who's been joining us in this group, I don't think she's on here tonight, but she's an art teacher. She's always teaching her kids about a beautiful oops. So when you make a mistake, you don't start over, you don't throw it out and start over, you just fix it and figure out a way to make it work. And so that's what I didn't get upset or stressed about this. I thought, I'll just go over it with a wider piece of tape and then use letters that actually show up. And then on this side, I'm going to put down my window, my little pocket window. I'm going to only glue it on these three sides, the sides and the bottom. I'm going to leave the back open. And then I'm going to use, I'm going to write out 3 or 4 little brief testimonies. One is no doubt going to be about caregiving, and how God has sustained me for going on 3 years now of caregiving. One is going to be about waiting. And when my son went through the process of passing his test, you've all heard this story probably. It was a very hard time of waiting. Waiting is hard for us. We want to know, we want answers now. And I'm going to write out a little testimony about waiting that I could share with someone. And so I'm just going to think of, different things that I have experienced. Your experiences are going to be different from mine. And then I'm going to slide those in here. And this is just going to be my little reminder that I have stories. When I tell them, they all need to be focused on giving God the glory. And then I'm going to put in some of these other little, like the Hebrew word that means testimony, that I'm going to put that in there. And then I'm going to use this space over here to put more scripture. So I'm just going to write that in my own personal handwriting and see how this page comes together. But it may seem messy to you guys, but I just really love it and think it's a lot of fun. So I hope you'll give it a try. And even if you don't have the colored pencils, just use watercolor paint.